I fucking love space, and anybody who knows me knows that. Like, that's one of the first things you learn about me. So, of course, when I saw Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan was on Chirp for, I think it was around $3, I went ahead and bought it. Like, immediately. Like, I don't even remember buying it. It was just suddenly in my library. It is amazingly well narrated by Carl Sagan and also by his wife later on in the book, because I think Sagan wrote the first. Sagan wrote the whole book. Let me see. Sagan narrated the first 4 chapters, and I think after his death, his wife narrated the rest of the book. So I thought it was really sweet to see their voices come together in a project like this, even after his death. And I love that they both seem to really share a passion for the subject, and it really shows in both of their voices. I mean, I took it for granted that Carl Sagan did, but his wife seems to be just as fascinated by this topic, and like, it was such a joy to listen to. I'm not an atheist because I do believe in something, so I'd be more of an agnostic. However, I have been deconstructing my faith recently, and I used to be a devout Christian. But now, my reflections on spirituality keep coming back to the cosmos, which is why I was really interested in this book. And it's kind of hilarious that I'm no longer a Christian, because my first channel, Hyena Edits, back when I first started, and it was just called Spotted Hyena, I was trying to figure out what to do with it, and so one of the first videos I uploaded was a lyric video of Lord of the Dance. That video is still getting like over 1 million views, and I am getting comments on it about like once a week. So it's very weird to think like, oh right, yeah, that's also part of my channel. That's also something that I did. However, even though I don't really consider myself a Christian anymore, I do believe that there are things that we just cannot perceive in our human forms, but that do exist. I mean, obviously, there's like a whole spectrum of light beyond the visible spectrum, but beyond that, I do believe that there are other planes of existence, and I believe in souls, and that consciousness is kind of tied to the soul in a way. It's kind of hard for me to pin down my beliefs right now, but central to it is the cosmos and humanity's relationship to the cosmos. Because as Sagan says throughout the book, humans have always had a deep connection with the stars. We've always looked up at them and wondered. They fueled our creativity and our curiosity since our earliest ancestors existed. However, space is also terrifying. It is hugely powerful beyond our comprehension. And yet, we are constantly trying to go to it, to explore it, to discover its mysteries. And I think that is really fascinating and really inspiring. And I think that humans have a very close spiritual tie to the cosmos. I don't necessarily believe in astrology. I don't think there's really empirical evidence for astrology, so I have a hard time taking it seriously. Although, coincidentally, I happen to have a lot of traits of my astrological sign. I'll make jokes about that. However, in general, like, horoscopes have never really made sense to me. I've had my natal chart done, and it like hasn't really been that accurate. Most of it seems like just cold reading to me. I think everybody has elements of the zodiacs in them, and some people kind of gravitate more towards one or the other, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with when in time you were born. Except that there are some differences between summer and winter babies, which do slightly correspond with the astrological signs, but not enough to write horoscopes about. So that's my view on it. And by happy coincidence, apparently I'm on a real sci-fi kick lately, because I've been reading The Life Below, which is a sequel to The Final Six, which is a YA sci-fi thriller type thing. It's really neat if you like the idea of space camp, and it's an interesting mix of hard and soft sci-fi. But the characters in it are fun to follow, and they really capture the kind of fascination and wonder that we have with space, and also how we're fucking up our own planet and how space might be our last chance to survive as a species, which is also something that Carl Sagan talks about. And it's a really frustrating dichotomy. He thinks, and I agree with him, although my opinion has no weight because I'm not a scientist, that interplanetary and maybe even interstellar travel, space travel, is the next step in our species' evolution. However, we have a lot to contend with on Earth, because as far as we know right now, it is the only planet that is habitable to humans. Anything else we'd have to terraform, which would take an absurd amount of resources that'd be better spent fixing our problems here on Earth. So we're in kind of a transitional phase right now, and it's really frustrating. But I hope, really, really hope, and I'm slowly losing that hope as time goes on, that we'll get through it and we will become a spacefaring civilization, and that future humans will look back on this era and go, oh my god, it must have sucked to live through that. Good thing things are there now. I really hope. I don't know if I believe that will happen, but I have to hope that there's still a chance that the future will be better, that we're not going to wipe ourselves out. We're not really on a good track with that right now, though. I'm trying to stay optimistic, and that's part of the reason why I was listening to Pale Blue Dot. It's been hard, though, which is part of the reason it's been such slow going with me with reading through the Final Six duology. Although now that they're actually in space and not on the dying Earth, maybe I will get back into it and read more of it. Oh, and there's a third space thing that I'm doing lately. So today I went to FYE and I found out that they sell Starset CDs. So now I finally have a CD of Starset so I can play it in my car and have actual good audio quality. Because my car is old and the CD player works better than the radio or the Bluetooth. So I'm really happy that I have a CD, and you can't see me, but I'm flapping my hands intensely right now. And I've been a huge fan of Starset since I discovered them a couple years ago in college. Their music has been a huge inspiration to my writing. And I think their music really captures what's so fascinating about space. I love how their lyrics combine the fascination with space and like all the stars and black holes and the void, the lack of gravity, all these things that are completely alien but also fascinating to us, with these intense, very human feelings of love and loss and like it's just very human emotions. And I think that really brings out why I love sci-fi, and it's been inspiring me a lot with my own sci-fi webcomic, which I'll probably make another video about because I could go on about it for a whole video. To me, it kind of reminds me of road trip novels, which I also like, although it's hard to find good ones. Paper Towns is pretty okay. I liked Mosquito Land too. I know that one got mixed reviews, but I thought it was a lot of fun. But road trip stories and space travel stories tend to cross over a bit. I'm thinking of some of the scenes in even the original Star Wars trilogy during the downtime when they're traveling places, or like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a bunch of people in a small vehicle on a long journey with very little opportunity to get out of each other's hair, and this setting really kind of forces conflict in really interesting ways. And then also their destinations and detours take them to places far outside their comfort zone, and they have to kind of readjust their worldview in order to like survive in this new environment. And I find it fascinating to see how characters react to that and what that says about us. I think Cowboy Bebop also falls into the space travel as road trip thing, although I haven't actually watched many episodes of it yet. I started watching it and then like shit happened in my life, and then I kind of forgot to go back to watching it. But from what I saw, it was like really well done, and I really do want to get back to it. And I think I will soon. I keep saying sci-fi when I really should be saying space opera, because sci-fi includes like dystopian and post-apocalyptic scenarios on Earth, or just like futuristic scenarios on Earth as well. So space opera is when people are actually in space and traveling through space. So I'm gonna try to remind myself to use the correct terminology. It's space opera. Although I guess space opera tends to kind of imply a more classic melodramatic story like Star Wars. So I guess, I don't know. I'm gonna not worry too much about semantics and just say sci-fi, because one thing I learned about in college when I was studying creative writing was once you try to think for more than 2 seconds about a definition, it starts to fall apart. Definitions are always changing. There's always going to be exceptions. So it's good to have a working definition that most people generally agree on, but clarify things when necessary, and sometimes you need a different word. Language is like one of the most chaotic and illogical creations of humans, or at least English is. So just like don't worry about it, man. I mean, even the dictionary changes things like all the time based on how people use them, and people's language changes faster than the dictionary. Language is really weird, and that's why I don't stick too closely to labels or definitions of things. I just use what I feel is generally agreed upon. However, I'm usually wrong about that too, so. And I have to mention the sheer scale of space as well. It's like the human brain literally cannot comprehend how massive space is. We are nothing on top of nothing on top of nothing in the grand scheme of things. Which I find kind of takes off a lot of the pressure of trying to be something, because you cannot be something. You are a little ape on a little rock with a thin little atmosphere. It's not that big a deal. So I've always found that concept kind of oddly comforting. And I think it's probably like deeper Freudian reasons for that or something, but I'm not gonna get into that in this video. Maybe later. But also, I've never really felt particularly small, because I've always been interested in science in general, and I went through a phase where I did a lot of research into microbes, amoebas, your body's cells and viruses and stuff like that. And even like atoms and molecules and like protons and subatomic, even like things that are smaller than protons. Getting into, I don't know anything about quantum physics, but I tried to research into that, and that kind of left me with the impression that on top of being mind-bogglingly huge, the universe also contains things that to us are mind-bogglingly tiny, and from their perspective we'd be as massive as the universe. So in the grand scheme of things, we're kind of right in the middle. And I just find that massive scale from tiniest to largest to be like a really neat thing to think about at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. However, space still is scary as fuck for plenty of other reasons. Humans were definitely not made to go there. However, early in our history, we were not really meant to survive on the savannah either. However, we came down from the trees and we became bipedal, and now we're here. So who's to say in the future humans won't evolve to better survive in space? However, I think it'd be hard to evolve a way around literally not having oxygen or air at all in general. Maybe though, who knows? But right now at least, space is absolutely hostile to life. Like, it seems to be actively trying to kill you. The vacuum has no gravity and no air. Well, technically there's always like little particles, but no air to speak of. And so if you take off your spacesuit, you will die horrifically. And if you're in a spaceship and something breaks through the walls of it, you will die horrifically, because the pressure of the air escaping will probably crush you. It's so easy to die in space. One wrong move. And yet, it's always been my dream to go there. It kind of reminds me of whenever I'm driving and I see an abandoned building, I just kind of slow down, look at it, and I think, how could I get into that building? And I wonder what I would find there when I did. I'm just a nosy bitch, what can I say? But I think on a species level, we're all nosy bitches. And the idea of finding something that's never been found before is just too powerful of a pull to just ignore and stay safe. Like, humans need more than just safety to thrive as a species. We need to be curious, we need to innovate, we need to discover things. That is what keeps us alive. And I don't know what it is about that, but that just kind of really moves me, and is another thing that kind of ties into my spiritual beliefs. And why I've kind of gotten away from organized religion. Because any system that's meant to stifle your curiosity cannot have humanity's best interests at heart, because humans are an innately curious species. We need to be able to ask questions and seek knowledge. Which kind of leads me to, I watched a video, or listened to at work when I was kind of between audiobooks, a video by Wendigoon about Paradise Lost, which is a book I had studied in college, and so it was interesting to hear a slightly different perspective on it. It's really neat. I think Wendigoon should be a college professor. The Tree of Knowledge sticks with me as a concept from the Genesis story. And there's some people who say, oh, that there's knowledge that humans should just never know, are never meant to be known. And I used to wholeheartedly believe that as a kid, and my thinking used to be, well, then why would God put it there? That would be like telling a 5-year-old kid, don't eat the cookies, and then setting the cookies on the edge of the counter right in the kid's reach. Like, what do you expect is going to happen? But it's not. Now that I'm older, my thought about it is that I don't think any knowledge is inherently bad, and there's certainly no knowledge that should be eternally censored. I'm against censorship in general. However, I think there's some knowledge that we as a species aren't at a level of wisdom to deal with. Carl Sagan has the example of asteroids. If we knew how to deflect asteroids right now, there are evil people in the world who would use it for evil. They would start deflecting asteroids at their enemies, or taking the whole world out with them, the way Hitler tried to get rid, destroy all of Germany, which apparently was a thing that happened. I was never taught that in school. Humans are not in a position to have any sort of knowledge about anything that could be a weapon of mass destruction. We shouldn't even really know much. We shouldn't even really have access to nuclear power. We were not ready for the way technology has advanced. But technology is not this separate force. It is us. We are doing this. So we as a species have gotten ourselves in way over our heads with this stuff. And I think maybe that's what the Tree of Knowledge is supposed to symbolize. However, I still blame God for that one, because Adam and Eve as characterized in the Bible, were purely innocent. They didn't even know that evil and suffering and everything could exist, so they could not know the stakes of what they were doing. And since God is described and characterized as a father, thinking about this from a parenting perspective, there are ways to prepare kids for the world. Like, no parent wants their kid to suffer, but the world sucks and there's bad stuff out there. Even in Eden, there was the tree of knowledge that was there. So, but there are ways to prepare your kid for that kind of harsh reality without completely corrupting them and without leading them to make a decision that will permanently fuck them up. You can introduce concepts slowly and gently in an age-appropriate way. You can let your kid make smaller mistakes while they're able to make those small mistakes and help pick them up when they fall. You can discipline your kid in a gentle and authoritative way. Gentle parenting is another thing I've gone on the research rabbit hole about. There are ways that you can prepare a child for the world without throwing them to the wolves or setting them up for failure the way God did in Genesis. So if God's a parent, if God's the ultimate father, that says something pretty bad about fathers. And I know that a lot of Christians, probably most Christians, don't view the Genesis story as literal. There's a disturbing amount who do, but I'm aware that the Genesis story is generally not perceived as literal by probably most Christians. However, I think there are enough instances in the Bible where I think, there are better ways to handle this if you really are a father. Which, if you're interested in hearing more about that, I pretty much ripped this concept straight from Theremin Trees' channel. Check them out. They do some great work on deconstructing religion and abusive systems in general. They go at it from a more atheistic bent, which, as I said before, I'm not really an atheist. However, if you take that with a bit of a grain of salt, there's a lot there that is really helpful. So, if space travel is like the tree of knowledge, it's a fascinating metaphor it's really hard to put into words exactly how I feel about it, because I'm not a philosopher. Most of this is probably completely incoherent. But as a writer, I just find space endlessly fascinating in what it reveals about human nature and in the sheer, literally infinite amount of storytelling opportunities that it gives. Although it's kind of both funny and sad to be listening to a book that was written in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think. And Sagan's predictions for the future of science and space travel and humanity in general. And seeing how many of his predictions were accurate. A lot of his theories about how science was going to progress in the near future have come to pass. However, I think he had way too much faith in humanity. Definitely way more faith in humanity than I had. Or maybe it's not necessarily that he had too much faith in humanity, but that humanity is just disappointing. And hey, that ties into another random YouTube video I watched. Kurzgesagt's latest video about the collapse of humanity and how humanity will probably survive even if we have an apocalypse that destroys most of us. We will rebuild, and it will be a setback, but it will be one that we as a species will survive, even though it will suck in the present. Which is an infinitesimally small comfort when you're living on the verge of an apocalypse. But nice to know that all the previous progress won't be entirely wasted. So, maybe not in the near future, but at least in the future, I do think humanity will start traveling to other planets. However, that's assuming that our next apocalypse doesn't just wipe us out completely. I'm sorry, guys, I'm really trying to stay optimistic. But, like, rainwater is now toxic. What are we doing? We need to turn the ship around, like, yesterday. I don't know what to do about it. If you have any power in changing anything at all, you need to be on it. Even if it's something that you think is radical, if you think you can do it, do it. Like, we need change to happen, like, yesterday, for the sake of our species' survival. Because I don't want us as a species to live on this planet, this one planet, and then just fizzle out and die like so many mammals. I want to believe that we can go to other planets, that we can explore new worlds, that we can have a Star Trek future. But it's not going to happen passively. We need to actually fix our shit.